In this video, I sit down with guitar practice expert Mike Philippov from practiceguitarnow.com to discuss and demonstrate cool acoustic guitar techniques and how best to practice them. Hi, this is Simon Candy from acousticguitarlessonsonline.net, and in this lesson, myself and Mike work through a number of tips for playing acoustic guitar, including the best way to develop a great fingerpicking technique, the role of hybrid picking and how to integrate this into your guitar playing, the role of a thumb pick, when and when not to use one when fingerpicking guitar, the best way to practice bar chords, and how to get into open and alternate tunings. We also discuss the key differences between playing an electric guitar versus an acoustic guitar. Watch until the end of this video for a special free ebook audio I've created for you on how to spice up your acoustic rhythm guitar playing. So let's get into it.
All right, Simon. So let's kick this off with a question. So let's say I am an electric guitar pick style player, which I am, and most people watching my channel typically tend to be. But let's say that I also have an interest in finger picking and acoustic guitar playing, and I want to get started. Where do I begin?
I would begin with the picking hand because it's different positioning for finger picking versus flat picking or pick playing. There's a very, very simple way to guarantee you get your hand in the right position for finger picking, and it's a real simple drill here where you get the three fingers of your picking hand. So for me, that's my right hand, and you place each finger in finger picking. The fingers have a letter that reference each finger. So index is I, M is M, and the ring finger is A, and these are like Spanish terms. So for the fingers, and P is thumb. So we've got P, I, M, A. Now, if we take those three fingers and we place them all side by side on the third string, the G of the guitar, all sitting just on the string there, and then we take the thumb and we also put that on the third string. So thumb and three fingers are all sitting on that one single string there, the third string. And from there, you take your thumb without moving the three fingers or your hand. You just take your thumb and you place it on the bottom string. You leave your index finger where it is on the third string. And you take your middle finger and you put that on the second string, the B, and your ring finger goes on the top string. And if you do that, your hand will be in the perfect position to finger pick. Okay, you can't go wrong that way. When you look down from your viewpoint, you will see that your thumb and your index finger make a little bit of like an X. The thumb, the fingers should be behind the thumb. If we sort of approach finger picking from a flat pick perspective, you know, the typical angle your hand is when you're flat picking, and we just then go to pluck the strings, these fingers will be out in front of the thumb, and you'll be picking at odd angles to the strings, like sort of more or less 45-degree angles with the fingers. They need to be more standing up at 90-degree angles, or yeah, thereabouts.
What about hybrid picking? So this is something I personally have zero experience with, but I had some people ask me, I've had people email me, and I usually send them to your website and your channel because I know you have way more experience about this than I do. So again, I'm a pick style player looking to do hybrid picking. What are the tips you have for that?
For me, I do it because basically I see there's three ways we can play guitar. We can use a flat pick, we can use our fingers, and we can hybrid pick. So I like to be pretty versatile and be able to use my fingers when necessary. So when you're hybrid picking, of course, you've taken a finger out of the equation because the index is needed to hold the pick with the thumb, of course. So I would just really, practice patterns that you would normally finger pick or even pick with, just your pick if you're not finger picking at all, and just practice playing those hybrid picking. So if I'm playing up a C chord, I'm going to use my pick to play the root note. And then I might bring in the pinky here just to have an extra finger because the index is out, but you don't necessarily have to. But it's really just taking things you'd play with a flat pick and seeing if you can, use hybrid picking. So I might have, typically I do some like open string type runs where I might go something like that. So I'll think, okay, can I do that with hybrid picking? Which you can, right? I'm basically alternating between my pick and fingers. And you can hear the sharper sort of tone with the pick. So you might make that choice because you like the sound of that. Hybrid picking is good because you can revert between finger picking and flat picking very smoothly because you've got the pick there at all times. Sometimes when I'm strumming, I'll use my pick and fingers because I like the sound of that more. I like the sound of my nails against the back of the strings with some of my strumming. So I'll always mix up flat pick with my fingers, basically. And that's a pure choice born from the tone that I'm getting when I do that.
What about like thumb picking that some people use? Is that just basically an alternative to hybrid picking, or is there a more unique application to it that's different from hybrid picking?
Okay, so thumb picks. So for those who don't know, thumb pick is just a pick that's going to sit below your thumbnail. So when I first used a thumb pick, which was many years ago, I used to think you just sort of place it over the top of the fingernail like that, or the thumbnail like that, but it does need to sit down below the thumbnail. And there's all sorts of different thumb picks that you can get. But basically, for me, I mean, it's a personal choice as to whether you want to use a thumb pick or not. But for me, thumb picks, I will use a thumb pick when I'm Travis picking. And if I'm not Travis picking, typically I don't use a thumb pick at all. So Travis picking is a way of finger picking that was born from a player many years ago, Mel Travis. And it's basically where you keep a bass happening on the beat. 1, 2, 3, 4. And you have different bass patterns. I won't go right into the detail here, but the whole sound of Travis picking is to get that muted, sharp sounding bass. If I just use my thumb, you can hear the difference there. It's much more mellow, softer, doesn't have the same definition as the thumb pick does. And then when you've got the thumb pick going, you want to get that bass. It's not going to quite sound the same if I... Sounds okay, but it's not, not quite the sound that you want with Travis picking. So for me, Travis picking, I'm going to use the thumb pick all the time. But if I'm playing other finger picking stuff, I don't actually like that sharper sound with the thumb mostly. So an example where thumb pick wouldn't be such a good choice, in my opinion, at least, if I'm doing like a walking bass sort of thing. Right? I want to get that more mellow sound with my thumb when I'm doing a walking bass. And I also want to, with a walking bass, I like to sometimes put in like an upstroke with my thumb. And if I'm playing with the thumb pick and I'm doing something like that, it's too sharp, it's too defined, it doesn't sound like a walking bass. There's got to be a mellower sort of sound. So that's an example of where I would definitely use my thumb as opposed to the thumb pick. And a lot of, anything outside of Travis picking, I'm going to use my thumb to get that mellower sound.
Let's zoom out a little bit and just talk about acoustic guitar versus electric guitar in general. So some of the things that are different between the two are really obvious, like the acoustic is bigger, the action is higher and stuff like that. But are there any differences that are sort of less obvious and that until you get into acoustic playing you don't really realize? So what are some things that are harder than most people realize on acoustic? And also conversely, what are some things that most people think would be hard but are actually easier, if any? Like, do any things come to mind?
There are certainly differences in how you might approach playing something on the acoustic guitar. for example, if you're, we all know about the unplugged stuff, everyone seems to do that, or has done so for many years now. But the unplugged scene, so, you're taking an electric guitar song and you put it onto the acoustic guitar. And if you just kind of dump it on there and play it exactly as you would on electric, it's not typically going to work that well. I mean, it's going to sound like the song, but there's so much more you can kind of tap into the characteristics of the acoustic guitar, using open strings and double stops and slides and things like this, where, it kind of compensates for things that we don't have, like distortion, and there's not the same amount of sustain on an acoustic guitar. So, that can kind of, can be a bit of a hindrance if you're not used to that. But the open strings, the droning of open strings with chords and sliding to replace bending at times, because it is harder to bend on the acoustic guitar. You can certainly bend, and that's a pretty common thing to do on an acoustic guitar, depending on the styles that you play. But, depending on the setup of the guitar and the scale and so forth, there's going to be positions that you're going to struggle to bend. Like, I'm going to really struggle to bend down here at the second fret. I'm not going to get much more than a quarter step bend there. So, if I want to, do something there that's got a slide, I'm going to want to not bend, I'm going to slide, right? As opposed to bend. It's not going to be the exact same sort of phrasing of that note, but then, that's the characteristics of the acoustic guitar. One other thing that comes to mind is just the string noise. You get a lot more string noise as you move on an acoustic guitar, typically, depending on the strings you're using, but there's always going to be that element. And it's something that you want to keep in mind, but it's also a characteristic of the acoustic guitar. So you're not realistically going to be able to move around on the acoustic guitar without any string noise whatsoever.
What about playing bar chords? Because that I know that sometimes people ask me about this as well. It's a very challenging aspect of playing acoustic guitar in particular. If you've got a song that has a lot of bar chords, people's thumb gets tired and the hand feels like it's gonna fall off after about a minute or so. The song is 3 minutes. You really got to struggle to keep up. So what are some tips you may have for making bar chords easier to play?
This much the same. I mean, I'll go through some things now, but much the same as electric. Of course, it's going to feel a little bit harder on the acoustic, but it really is just, I find those that say, oh man, the acoustic's hard to play, are those who don't really play much acoustic guitar. So of course it's going to be hard if you pick it up once every month or once every few weeks. But with bar chords, one thing you don't want to be doing when you're playing your bar chords is squeezing the neck of the guitar. So we don't want to have equal pressure, if you like, coming from the thumb and the fingers. It really wants to be kind of somewhere around sort of 80-20 or something like that, roughly. Okay, so, but if we just sort of go and play, and on the acoustic where you think, wow, this is a bit harder to play this, bar chords, I better, push harder with my fingers, you might have a tendency to squeeze the neck. So one approach that I would suggest or recommend is playing the bar chord as best you can with no thumb on the back. So it's purely 100% coming from the fingers. And, that could be tricky, of course, and it doesn't really matter too much if you don't quite get the sound. But then you can bring the thumb to the back of the neck and control more the pressure that it's going to exert on the back of the neck of the guitar, which is not equal to what the fingers, as I was saying before, not equal to what the fingers are doing at the front on the fretboard there. So it's just starting with the fingers and then bringing in the thumb, and you find you can control how much you want that thumb. It's barely pushing in. It's just sitting on the back and weighted down on the back of the fretboard, and then you can exert a little bit of pressure on that. But you can feel it's like if the fingers push, you don't want the thumb to push. You don't want them to be one entity there. You want the fingers to be able to control how much they push in, and you want the thumb to be able to control. You don't want one to sort of make the other one push as well, if that makes sense. Keeping the finger, the index finger right up against the fret, as opposed to over here where you're more likely to get the muted notes. Right over the top of not over the top, but right up against the fret. It'll look like I'm on top of it, but I'm just pushing up against the fret.
Yeah, great tips, Simon. One thing I also say to people who ask me about this is the callus on your index finger is really, really important. Just like the callus on your fingertips for regular playing, the thicker the calluses are, the less effort it takes to push down a note. And same goes for bar chords, obviously. And so the reverse of that is it's a perishable skill. If you don't play for a while, your calluses disappear. If you don't play bar chords for a while, your bar chord callus will disappear, and it makes bar chords harder, which makes the whole thing harder. You exert more energy, you get tired more quickly, and so the thicker you can get the callus to be, the better. Let's get into the can of worms of open tunings. I know we can spend a week talking about open tunings because there's so many of them out there, but generally speaking, if I'm used to playing in just standard tuning and I want to get into any one of those alter tunings that acoustic guys like to play with, what is the best way to get into that without having my brain explode because like all the notes are in different places now?
A way in, I mean, if you want a nice, easy sort of way, the easiest pathway, let's say, into open tunings is just start by dropping the D, dropping the E down to a D, low D. And, that way you just introduce one string. I mean, that's I'm sure we all know that's a common tuning in itself. It's not an open tuning, but it is an altered tuning. You're altering one of the strings. So you drop that down to a D and you get used to playing, a few things using the low D. So I do have a guitar here. This is in Dadgad, which I'll explain in a moment, but there's a low D there. Okay, so as soon as you drop to a low D, if you're playing power chords, now your power chords are going to be in a single fret. So that's one thing to realize. And it's these little things you've got to kind of live in the tuning. So if you've got multiple guitars and you want to get used to a particular open tuning, tune one to that open tuning and leave it in that open tuning and live in that open tuning for a while, and become familiar with it. You could then next drop the top E string to a low D as well. Now you've got strings 5, 4, 3, 2 haven't changed. So this is Dadgad. It's not just 2 low Ds here, but you could play open chords and get some nice, the ring of the open D on the top of the open chord would be really nice. If we were doing that over a C chord, it would add like an add 9 or I think. You'd have the D chord with the D on top, so an extra root note there, and it's the ringing out of the open D strings that you don't normally hear in standard tuning that will start to bring that characteristic of open tunings. From there, if we look at some of the common open tunings like Dadgad, open D, open G, those 3 tunings, if you write down what the open strings are, they're quite similar. There's commonalities between them. They've all got low and high D strings. So, if you're playing in any of those tunings, each tuning is not going to be all that different to the other. It's easing your way in. I mean, you don't have to do a string at a time. You can just jump straight in with a particular tuning. But if you're going to do Dadgad one day and then next session I'll do open G, now I'll do open D, that's not going to be so good because you're not going to settle in any one tuning. If you get really comfortable in one of them or comfortable enough in one of them, then when you look at the next one, you'll be able to use kind of the previous one as a reference point for the next tuning. There are a few things. And then when you're sitting in that open tuning, you start to discover things about it. For example, in Dadgad, we've got, if I play my 6th and 4th strings together, that'll be an octave. And if I play my 5th and 2nd strings together, that's an octave now because they're both A's. And if I play my D4 and D on top, there's octaves. So I can see how the octaves work out, how they work out in Dadgad. Or if I want to play 5ths, 1st and 3rd, or 2nd and 4th, and you can just kind of play around moving that 5th shape and bringing in the open strings. It's open tuning set it up for it to be easier for you to play. I could even just play like a D, let's say major scale on the top string. And if I just pick any of the open strings with any of the notes of the scale, it's all going to sound good. Can't go wrong. Right, all these notes are going to be part of the key, and you're going to get that nice drone of the root on the bottom there. Okay, so you start to discover the characteristics of the tuning, and learning tunings or songs that are in DAGAD or OpenG or whatever it is that you're going to explore is well worth it too, because that gives you a lot of insights. If you like this video, then you will love this ebook audio I've created for you called Awesome Acoustic Rhythm Techniques that will transform the way you play your guitar. In this ebook, I take you through one of the most common chord progressions in music. What's not so common are the approaches we will apply to this progression. You learn how to use embellishments and extensions to decorate the progressions you play, much like a pianist would, resulting in very cool, unique, and sophisticated sounding music. You also learn great ways to play rhythm fills that can punctuate the space between your chord changes. This is much like the rhythm guitar playing of Jimi Hendrix. So click the link in the description below this video and download your free ebook audio, Awesome Acoustic Rhythm Techniques that will transform the way you play your guitar. Let me know in the comments section what acoustic guitar topics you would like to see covered in future videos. I read all comments and I always love to hear your suggestions, so hit me up. If you like this video, then hit that like button, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, and of course hit the all important notification bell button so YouTube can tell you when I've released a new video. This is Simon Candy from acousticguitarlessonsonline.net. Thank you for watching this video. As always, I really appreciate your time, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.